All right, so let's go ahead and cut the tape up. So as we open the box, we have a little packet here. We'll check this out a little closer in a second. So there are 2 tubes. Tip this thing over and raise the box up. And we'll take the top foam off. And as we can see, it's completely plastic wrapped. All right, so we do have a door here in the front, and it is magnetized. And there is shrink wrap over this. All right, so let's start from the top. We have a connection here to our hot end assemblies. So I guess we will have to connect this. So we have a styrofoam insert that comes out. So it looks like these are our spool holders, and there are 2 of them for dual feeding. And then over here, it looks like we have all our wiring and also other pieces. So it looks like this whole piece just comes out the front. There's a styrofoam with a full spool of red PLA filament. Very cool that they include a whole spool of it. And this is our top cover that'll go on the very top. And we have little cutouts here for the tubing to go through. All right, so we have a little bit more foam inside. There's one here in the back by the lead screw. So now we can go ahead and pull the bed up. And when we do that, we can go ahead and pull our styrofoam out the bottom. Maybe need to go up a little more. So for the next part, we need to look at the manual and see how it all goes together. But before we do that, let's take a look at what it comes with. So we get a power cord, a USB cable to connect from the printer to the computer, a bracket of some sort. I guess it's not a bracket, it's a parts cooling fan duct. I guess we'll have to install that, and it comes with a few little bolts. We also get a little baggie of tools, some grease, a wrench, and an extra knob, and some short PTFE tubings. So here we have the manual. There's a 16 gig SD card that's branded ScanDisk. We also get 2 extra build surfaces for our bed. Very nice that they include this. Here we have a thing called special sheet, and this is just for bed leveling to the nozzles, and it's just the right size to go between the 2 nozzles to do spacing. And here we have the user's manual. So it is black and white, shows us all of the parts that are included, an overview of the printer and what everything is. The system here, unpacking the printer, and here we have hardware assembly. So there's really no step-by-step, it just kind of shows you how to use everything. So I guess the hardware assembly is our instructions here of how to get this thing together. All right, so looking on top here, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our hot end assembly. If you guys can see, there's 2 threaded holes that will line up with these holes. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna simply set the whole thing over, and it's going to line up, and the little baggie with the fan duct is going to have the bolts we need. And so there's 2 longer bolts and 1 short one. The 2 longer bolts are going to go underneath through our bracket into the hot end assembly. So let's go ahead and grab our Allen wrench out of this bag. All right, so we started one and the other. And we can go ahead and snug them up real good. And you don't want to go too crazy tight because this is plastic. All right, and that should make this really solid. It feels really good. So the next part of our manual, it says we need to remove our fan so we can install the fan duct into it. So here we have our fan, and it's actually quite a large fan. Let's go ahead and undo it. So that just comes right off. Now we can grab our fan duct and connect it to the fan just like that. And so now it's all going to go back together. We can see the 2 bolts that will go back into the fan, and then the 3rd little bolt, which came with the duct, will go into here. All right, and so all 3 of them are tight. Now before you tighten these up, leave them loose so this can move around, because this little fan duct has to click in a certain place down there before it seats right. So tighten the main fan last. And so this is this step here. Here you can see how the bolts go. So for the next part, let's install our spool holders. So if we look at here at the back of the printer, we can see that there's 2 slots, and those are going to accommodate our spool holders. So we're simply just going to insert it into the slot and then go down. So nothing too complicated here. Very simple actually. And that's what they look like. So they do move around a bit, but that doesn't really technically matter. And I am noticing that these are quite a bit more narrower than a typical spool like this one here. If I put it on, it doesn't go all the way in there. Well, that's kind of interesting. And so for the last step, we just need to install our guide tubes. And that's these 2 we saw in the beginning. So they simply click into these grooves here. Just like that. Go ahead and do this other one. So our filament will go out into the tube, and then the other end will go into the extruder. So the one on the right will go to the right side, and the one on the left side. Now we do still have this top. Let's go ahead and try that out. So it should just go right over these tubes. And there's these 4 corners on each side the top goes into. And that is to, I guess, preserve the heat from coming out. But because there's cutouts in the back, I'm not sure how that is effective. But in any case, I guess to make this a more of a enclosed printer, they do have this top here. And when you're printing higher temperature filaments, every little bit of heat helps. All right, so let's take a closer look at this printer. So here on the top, we can see what it looks like. We have the cover, a nice logo, how our tubing and wiring comes out the back. So we do have a dual hot end with 2 extruders and I guess 2 of everything, and including 2 separate nozzles there on the bottom. So there is only one cooling duct for the nozzle on the left, and the one on the right doesn't seem to have one. And so the way the axes work is you got rails that it slides on. Same thing for the Z-axis, 2 rod rails. And here we have our X-axis motor, and our Y-axis motor is back there, and it has a belt that goes to the top that connects to these brackets on each side, and that runs the Y-axis. Maybe you guys can see the belt moving. So our X-axis switch is there. Our Y-axis is in that corner, and our X-axis is right there. So here we have the build plate, and it is a pretty decent print size, not large, but definitely reasonable for most prints. And the build platform does not appear to be removable, so it's stationary. But the build plate is heated. We can see the plugs underneath, and it adjusts on 3 pivot points. So another thing that's kind of interesting is the wiring that's going to the bed. It's just kind of open air here. I'm going to tuck them back into the inside there so they're not dangling around everywhere. And I feel like they should have put maybe some kind of shroud or protection around them. In any case, maybe that's not a concern. So yeah, we have 2 walls on each side, and the walls are all plastic, including the back one, but there is a steel frame on all the corners of the printer. So as we go out, we can see we have this nice clear acrylic door, and it is magnetized. On the left side on the front of the printer, we have the logo. It says Creator Max. And here we have our touchscreen. Go ahead and pull this protector off. And on the bottom of the printer, we have rubber feet all around the 4 corners. So if we go to the right side of the printer, here we can see this is where we're going to plug in our USB cable to the computer. And also our SD slot is here, and it is a full-size SD card. So that's really nice to see. And over here, it looks like we have a little reset button. So on the left side, there's nothing much going on here. We do have these really nice handles where we can lift the printer on both sides. And on the top here, this piece is metal, and it's part of the metal frame. So here we can see what the back looks like. So we have the wires and the tubes coming out. So the wire goes into this middle channel, and the tubes clip right here on both sides, which point here towards the spool holder. So our filament will go into here and then into the extruders. So the back is quite clean overall. Here we have a manufacturing label, and below that, this is where we're going to plug in our power cord, and this is our power switch. All right, so let's go ahead and plug this cord in, and it is quite a thick cord. So I'm going to hit the power button, and we can see the logo here come up. And our printer boots up. And the first thing I'm noticing that there is a light inside. You guys can see it turned on. So that's really nice. So on the touchscreen here, we can see that this is our print button, preheat button, and tools. So this is going to read our SD card. And by the way, it does have internal memory. This is our preheat button, so let's click that. So we can see it's 230 on both nozzles and 100 on the platform. So that seems a little hot for the platform. Let's just make it 70 for now. We'll click start, and it should start heating up. And we actually have a little graph here showing the progress of each one. So it looks like our nozzles are heating, but our platform is not. And I'm guessing once these are hot, the platform will start heating. All right, so we're going to let that heat. I'm going to go back. So let's check out these tools. So we have filament, level, home, manual, settings, setup, and about. So filament is going to be using our extruder, and you can see there's both of them. There's a left and the right. That's leveling the bed, which we'll be doing next. And we also need to hit this home button to make sure all of our axes work. Manual button is going to give us access to moving everything independently. And we have a settings here. Here we can choose our language, and I think that's touchscreen adjustment, factory reset, fan on, Wi-Fi, and pulley. So I'm not going to mess with any of this, but if you wanted to use Wi-Fi, they do have that option here too. So here we have the status of the printer and about. Here we have the name of the machine, the firmware, the print volume, which is 227 by 148 by 150. The amount of usage this printer had, which is 3 hours, which is interesting because I just turned it on. It must be factory testing. And tool count too, which is the 2 nozzles. All right, so that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and click the home button, and let's see if all of our switches work. So our X works, our Y works, and our Z works. So for the next part, let's level the bed, but before we do that, we need to run these knobs down a bit. That way we can press the build plate and make sure our nozzle is not going to hit the platform as we start the level. So I'm going to hit the level button, and it's going to move into position. And we're going to grab our special sheet and use it to level the bed. So we can see here that it's way too loose. So I'm going to raise it up by loosening the knob. So right when we get a little drag, I'm also going to check them individually. They seem to be about both equal, so that's a good sign. Then on the screen here, we're going to click next, and it's going to go to the next point. And we're gonna do the same thing down there. All right, so that feels pretty good. Click next. And by the way, guys, you're gonna need to do this quite a few times because it's not gonna be perfect the first time. The more you adjust it, it changes angles everywhere on each side. So like right now, this is a little tight, so we need to go down a bit. All right, that feels good. Click next and go straight to the middle. And the middle's a little tight also. And now we're gonna click finish. But I'm gonna go ahead and do this process at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 times to make sure my bed is ultra level, because it's quite important that it's level, because if you don't get it right, you're gonna have trouble when starting putting down your prints. So whenever preheating the nozzles, I realized that there's a toggle switch here for on and off, and the platform was actually off. So if we turn it back on and click start, we can see that our platform comes in and it's showing the temperature of it right now. So I started preheating it earlier and realized that it was just a toggle. So that's kind of good that you can individually choose what you want to preheat or not. So let's say if you weren't going to use both of the nozzles, you technically don't need to preheat both of them. So all right, guys, so I think I got my build platform pretty level. So let's go ahead and grab this SD card and plug it into the side of the printer, and then we'll go to print. Here we can see that it sees our SD card, and looks like we do have some files on there. Okay, so here I see it says test files. Click on that. Looks like we have a few little things we can print. So we have a little model for ABS, PLA, and also a dual color cube here. All right, cool. So let's start with PLA first, and we'll see how that goes. And then we'll go to the multicolor. But before we can print anything, we need to get our filament into the printer. It looks very nice. Now FlashForge uses special spools that has a very narrow middle, and that's purposely for fitting on their spool holders. So we want to cut the filament on an angle so it feeds through easier. But yeah, the spool will just literally clip into here, and it literally perfectly fits in here. The only thing that doesn't make any sense, honestly, is the way this filament goes there. It's kind of way too close to this spool. Now we can pull this up a bit, and even more technically if we wanted to, all the way up here, to make it where it has a little better route. Honestly, I wish they would design this a little different, maybe go lower or something else, but in any case, it does go into tubing, and I'm using this tube here because this is the side with the fan duct, and I'm guessing this is the extruder that we're using for the single filament printing. So I'm gonna go ahead and push it all the way through until I hit something. All right, so it looks like there's some resistance. But yeah, this is how the filament goes on the back. I do have a smaller spool that could go here maybe. Well, okay, yeah, so it does fit in here perfectly. And later when we print our little cube, we can use this white here as our second color. So I'm just gonna leave it there until we're ready to print. So here's where the complexity starts to begin. Now, because we have to get to our extruder, we can't really do it through here anyhow, so we need to take this cover back off. So it does come off quite easy, but you probably don't even want to put this cover on unless you're really printing ABS or whatever other filaments that require more heat. So we're just gonna leave the cover off for now. And this is the tube that has the red filament in, and we can see the end of it right there. So all we gotta do is take it out, and then we're gonna manually feed it in there. Now there is a little lever here on the extruder. If you push down on it, you should be able to get past through it into the teeth, and that will grab it. So once it grabs it, we can put the tubing back in. All right, so now we're gonna hit on tools and then filament. And here we can see left load and unload. So we're gonna click a load left, and that's gonna start up the extruder, and we can see the filament is pumping out of there. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on done, and that stops it, and that's how we purge the nozzle. So let's go ahead and go back to our SD card, go to test files, and start this PLA print here. So once we click on it, we can see we have a few options. We can copy, delete, or print. Now if you click copy, it's gonna put it into the printer. That way you don't have to use it off of the SD card, but since we have the SD card in it, we can just print it from there. So I'll just click print, and there it goes. So the printer is starting. So it's heating up the nozzle to 225. All right, and there it goes. Well, let's hope everything's gonna be good with our level. And it appears to be okay, I think. Yeah, so far it looks good actually. It's probably a little hard for you guys to see because of that light from the top. It's kind of overexposing everything. But it looks like we started and everything looks good. But I'm gonna bring up my microphone so you guys can hear the printer. It does have stepper sound noises. So it's not silent. You can definitely hear the motors running, and obviously some fan noise also. So yeah, it looks like it's boogieing away. So I went ahead and unplugged the little light that's on the top here, and we could see a little better of how our print is looking like. So let's take a closer look at our screen. So on the top we have the file name, the printing time, which is 12 minutes, the left extruder, which is at 220, the right extruder, which is at idle, and then our build platform has 50C. Here we have a progress bar, which is at 0, and on the bottom we have hot buttons, stop, pause, and some more settings. So let's click on the settings. If we click that, we can see the only option we have is to change filament. So if you wanted to change your filament in the middle of the print, you could do that. But that's pretty much it. So you can't adjust anything else. Everything has to be pre-adjusted in the slicer. And there is no option of turning the light on and off. So if for some reason you didn't want it, like right now I don't because I'm filming, all you do is just unplug it and it's right behind this channel here. So, all right, so I'm just gonna let this thing print and we'll see what it prints out. Alright guys, so our first print is done and it took 1 hour and 26 minutes. So the bed cooled off pretty much. Let's see if we can pop this thing off. So yeah, it's not going to come off that easy. So having a little spatula kind of like this would definitely help out. I'm kind of surprised they didn't include one. Well, let's go ahead and see if we can take it off now. Alright, so yeah. So yeah, it comes off pretty easy once you get it going. And there we go. So it did print on a raft and it's not coming off at all. So I guess those settings were not done right. But in any case, let's go ahead and look at the model so we can see some vibrations here. So this is our y-axis and this is our x-axis. So we can see our x-axis looks quite a bit smoother than our y. So here's the other side of the x, a little bit smoother, but not bad on the y either. And here at the round part, all the layers are sitting pretty good. This does look like it's printed at 0.2 layer height. So overall looks pretty good and our top looks good too. So as far as the print structure overall, it looks quite good and feels very strong. So not a bad start. I'm actually quite excited to print our next print, which will be the multicolored. So let's click on the print, SD card, test files, and click the PG cube here. So it says it's going to take 3 hours and 22 minutes. I'm going to click the print button. And there we go. So the bed is coming up. So for some odd reason, our bed is heating up to 105. I don't know why it needs to be that hot, but I guess I'm just gonna leave it. Now, unless it's thinking that it's gonna be printing ABS, maybe that's what's going on. And there's nothing I can do to change that because it doesn't let me. All right, so that's probably gonna take a while for it to warm up to that temperature. All right guys, so as you can see, it actually hit 105, 106 now, and it's heating up the extruders. So that's quite impressive that it can go that hot, and it actually didn't take too long, maybe like 4 minutes. Well, I guess right here it says 5 minutes total, so it didn't seem that long overall, so I guess about 5 minutes. Now it's 6. Quite impressive that it can go to 105 with no issues. So I do have white in the other extruder. You can see the first extruder is extruding, and the other one is kind of oozing out a bit. So it does have white filament. I don't know why it's oozing out. So for now it's just building the raft, so once it actually starts printing the model, we should see color transitions between the two nozzles. Alright guys, so it looks like we've transitioned to white and it's printing on top of the red. So far it looks like everything's going quite good. So yeah, we can see the second nozzle printing, and the one on the left was actually seeping out. Okay, so it looks like we're printing with the first nozzle now. Now definitely a problem I see is that the white one is seeping right now. It's literally seeping as that one's printing. So yeah, that's not very good because it's getting, you know, all over the place where it's not supposed to be. So I'm not sure if that's adjustable or what. Okay, so now we're printing with the white one again. Alright, well, I'm not gonna say too much until it's done, and we'll see what it comes out like. But according to what I see, I'm not sure if it's gonna be all that great. It does look quite messy right now. So as it's printing and I'm looking at it, it's actually printing a wall around the model that it's printing. So I guess that's how it cleans itself out, is against that wall. And it seems to be working, so now that I'm looking at it, it's actually not looking bad. Kind of interesting, the method that it has to clean itself out. So I guess it purges around the wall and then it prints. to make sure it's going to have a continuously good feed. Seems to work, so we'll see what the model looks like once it's finished. Alright guys, so our multi-print is done, and yeah, it looks kind of like a pretty huge mess in here. But the interesting part is the part itself actually doesn't look too bad. So the technique it uses to clean itself is quite barbaric, it seems like. So there's a lot of seepage, and you know, the seepage kind of stays outside the walls, and you know, some inside also. But in any case, let's go ahead and try to take this off. So it does come off quite easy, so that's good. And so this is what we are looking at. So it did make a raft, and I hope I can get it off. So you guys can see the multicolored cube actually doesn't look too bad. There's quite a few hairs on it touching it, but it does appear to be that it might clean up quite well. Now we might be able to adjust the settings where it's not seeping as much, maybe a little more retraction, or I don't know, I'm not sure exactly what we can do to make this better. So I'm going to try to break this cube loose. I have a feeling this is not going to work that well. So I'm going to just grab some snips and snip around it. Alright, so we got some progress. I want to see if I can rip the raft off completely. Yeah, it's not coming off easy. So before I clean it off anymore, let's go ahead and look at it a little closer. So we can see there's quite a bit of little hairs everywhere. And most of them do come off quite easy, looks like, but I can see some white in the red, so that's not a good sign. And more white in the red here, not terrible, but it is there. And then we got these really hard lines here, and this is our raft that needs to be pried off. And at the top, it actually looks pretty decent, and there's not much bleeding on the top. A little bit, you can see the white, the red, but no white at all in the red, and a little bit of red in the white. Not bad. Alright, so we did print a color print successfully. Now this was not the best execution, but it still worked. And the thing that kind of surprises me is the slice here. Not only was it too hot at 220, and this probably caused extra stringing and all this mess here, but the thing that shocked me was the bed. It was at 110, which might have been okay to use on ABS obviously, but for PLA, and I can't imagine somebody doing their first test print with anything else but PLA. But in any case, that was definitely not good there. So, and that probably contributed to a lot more seepage and leakage also from the PLA, because you know, PLA was just way too overheated.